Let's get into today's Omni-Fi original. They thought they were testing our minds. We were testing their ability to break.
Conclave Station's great hall hummed with the tension of 100 species holding their breath. In the center of the vast circular chamber, a holographic display pulsed with numbers too complex for most species to comprehend. Chief Engineer Mira Okafor stood before it, grease smudged across her cheek, looking like a child who'd wandered into a temple of pure thought. Opposite her, the Weaver, Vexcari Elder, whose crystalline skin shifted from deep blue to molten gold as it processed information, observed with patient detachment. "Your species continues to surprise us, Engineer," the Weaver's voice resonated, each word a carefully measured stone dropped into a pool of stillness. "Your mathematical prowess has grown exponentially since first contact." Mira adjusted a tool at her waist, the familiar weight of comfort against the weight of expectation. That's what happens when you add chaos to equations. You get interesting results. The assembled council members exchanged glances, a human treating mathematics as casual conversation. They didn't know Mira had solved a ship's navigation equation in her sleep once, using her own dreams as variables. They didn't need to know. They just needed to watch. The competition began with elegance. The Weaver presented a problem that had stumped Vexcari mathematicians for 3 standard years, a tesseract projection in 7-dimensional space that required accounting for temporal variables most species couldn't perceive. Mira's fingers flew across a console, her brow furrowed in concentration. She wasn't just solving it, she was dancing with it. The numbers flowed through her like a language she'd spoken since childhood. For a moment, the hall held its breath. Then the Weaver's crystalline form shifted to a deep crimson. "Your solution contains 73 variables not accounted for," the Weaver stated, the first note of surprise in their millennia-old voice. Mira blinked, staring at her results. "Impossible. That's like trying to build a house without noticing the ground is missing." She double-checked, then triple-checked. The numbers didn't lie. She had missed fundamental aspects of the problem that, to the Vexcari, were as obvious as breathing. The Weaver inclined their head, a motion that took 3 full seconds. "Your species approaches problems with remarkable creativity. But creativity without completeness creates holes." The hall remained silent as the score was tallied, 437-2. Humans had lost not by a little, but by everything. Mira stood in the quiet of the human section of Conclave Station, the taste of defeat bitter in her mouth. Outside her temporary quarters, the station's life hummed on, a constant reminder of all the things humans had yet to master. Her comm badge chirped, displaying Captain Vasquez's face. "They're calling you irrational, you know," Vasquez said, her voice tight with frustration. "Saying your loss proves humans can't handle galactic-level complexity." Mira ran a hand through her hair, scattering metal shavings across her shoulders. "Let them talk. They won't when we're done." Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "Done? We just got mathematically dismantled by a species who count centuries in days." "Exactly," Mira said, a dangerous spark in her eyes. "They think in straight lines. We think in whatever damn shape works. Challenge them." "Challenge them? To what?" Vasquez asked, intrigued despite herself. Mira smiled, a genuine, razor-edged expression that didn't reach her exhausted eyes. "To a contest of improvisation. Something new. Something impossible." She leaned closer to the screen. "Something where there are no right answers. Only working ones." The Weaver would never accept, but that wasn't really the point. The point was to change the game entirely. The Great Hall had been rearranged. Where numbers had danced in empty space, now stood a chaotic collection of components, damaged plasma conduits, malfunctioning gravity regulators, a comms array spitting static, and a power source fluctuating like a dying star. Mira stood before this mess, a grin that bordered on manic spreading across her face. The weaver observed from their customary position, crystalline skin now a thoughtful shade of violet. "This is unexpected," the weaver stated, their four-fingered hands resting calmly at their sides. "There are no parameters. No defined problem." "Precisely," Mira said, bouncing on the balls of her feet. She pointed at the malfunctioning systems. "Fix all of it. Together. You have 1 standard hour." A sci-fi delegate chittered in disbelief. "This is not a proper competition. There are no rules." "Exactly," Mira exclaimed. "The rule is, make it work." The weaver remained still for a full 10 seconds, eternity in human terms. Then, their crystalline form shifted to gold. "Acceptable. We will participate." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. The Vexcari were masters of known problems. This was madness. But the weaver had spoken, and no one argued with a being who had outlived entire civilizations. The hour began. The weaver moved with deliberate precision, approaching the plasma conduit with the reverence of an artisan examining a masterpiece. Their crystalline fingers traced the damage, their multifaceted eyes absorbing every variable. "The power coupling is misaligned by 0.3 degrees, the weaver stated to no one in particular. "The containment field has 3.7 degradation. These are known issues with solutions in the Vexcari archives." Meanwhile, Mira had already disassembled 3 components and was jury-rigging a bypass using what appeared to be a power cell from a discarded maintenance bot and some duct tape that, upon closer inspection, was actually bioweave grown on the spot. "Problem solving," she muttered to herself, "is about making things do what you want them to do, not what they were designed for." An Orani delegate observed the proceedings with large, dark eyes. "The Vexcari approach is like following a river downstream to the sea. The human approach is like digging a new river when the old one doesn't go where they need." The hour ticked by, each second stretching into an eternity of possibility and failure. 20 minutes remained. The weaver had fixed the plasma conduit and stabilized the power source, their movements as precise and efficient as a master watchmaker. But the comms array still spat static, and the gravity regulator emitted a worrying hum. The weaver turned their attention to these remaining problems, their crystalline form shifting to deep blue, processing, calculating, accessing the accumulated wisdom of millennia. Meanwhile, Mira had somehow rerouted the comms array through the gravity regulator, creating a feedback loop that was, technically, working against itself. But it was working. Sort of. The static had transformed into a rhythmic pulse. "That is, not how it is supposed to function," the weaver observed, their tone conveying the same horror one might feel at seeing a priceless painting defaced with crayon. Mira didn't look up from her work. "Who said anything about supposed to? It's working." The council members watched in fascinated horror. This was everything wrong with humans, magnified and displayed for all to see. The Kren representative leaned to their neighbor. "That is like solving hunger by eating the food backwards." "It still gets eaten," the neighbor muttered. 10 minutes. The weaver had stabilized the comms array using a solution that would have made Vexcari engineers weep with its elegance and efficiency. But the gravity regulator remained problematic, its hum growing louder. Mira, meanwhile, had dismantled half the station's life support rerouting and was now attempting to stabilize the regulator by singing to it. Her voice, usually sharp and sarcastic, had softened into a low hum that resonated through the components. The weaver stopped what they were doing, their crystalline form shifting to gold. "What are you doing?" "Resonance," Mira explained without looking up. "Everything vibrates. Sometimes you just have to find the right frequency." She adjusted a setting, her voice rising slightly in pitch. The hum from the gravity regulator decreased. The weaver's multifaceted eyes widened, a microscopic movement that would have been missed by any other species. That is, not a documented solution. Of course not, Mira said, finally looking up, her face smeared with grease and triumph. Because no one else would be crazy enough to try it. The hour ended with all systems functioning, though not as they were designed, but as they needed to be. The hall was silent as the final system stabilized. The weaver stood before the jury-rigged masterpiece, their crystalline form shifting through colors so fast it seemed to vibrate. Then, slowly, deliberately, they inclined their head, a gesture of respect that took 5 full seconds to complete. Your species does not solve problems, the weaver stated, their voice carrying a note that had never been heard before, awe. You transform them. You turn impossibility into possibility through methods that should not work. Mira wiped grease from her forehead, her usual sarcasm replaced by quiet exhaustion. There's a difference between knowing the right way and finding a way that works. Sometimes the latter gets you farther. The weaver turned to the council, their multifaceted eyes scanning the assembly. We have spent millennia perfecting the art of solving known problems perfectly. The human approach, creating solutions where none existed before, may be the most valuable skill in this galaxy. A sci-fi delegate spoke, their voice delicate but firm. But their solutions are crude. Temporary. So are all solutions, Mira countered, her voice soft but clear. Everything breaks eventually. The question is whether you can fix it when it does. The weaver's crystalline skin settled into a deep, warm gold. Indeed. As Mira collected her tools, leaving the impossible jury-rigged systems functioning, the weaver approached. Your species continues to surprise us, engineer. Mira grinned. That's what happens when you add chaos to equations. The weaver's crystalline form shifted, a hint of what might have been amusement. We are weaving a new tapestry, you and I, Mira just winked. Just try not to trip over the thread.